What up, y'all? So, I don't got the mic right now. Well, also, I kind of do want to try out because I got a new phone. I want to see how my audio sounds a little bit. But yeah, let's talk about like people. What I want to start with this. Okay, let's talk about type stereotypes. So, the thing about type stereotypes is most people, when they get into it and they start learning about functions, they most people start with the stereotypes and things like that, the little like stereotypes you hear about different types, and eventually they realize like stereotypes is not the good way to type people and things like that. So like they end up discovering functions, figure out that's the real way to know, which is true, right? Functions is pretty much the core of every type. It's all made up of just cognitive functions, really. Where all is a combination of different functions playing off of each other and things like that. Naturally just playing off each other. And then you got the function axis where it balances out, they balance each other out, things like that. You know, you start learning about that stuff. But one issue that arises from that is people forget that. Well, people tend to, like, once they realize that those are just type stereotypes, they take it to the other extreme of it and they start to act like there's no truth in any stereotype. They'll start acting like that stereotypes are just all imaginary. Now, like, the thing about stereotypes is, and that goes in every aspect of life, things become stereotypes for a reason. Like, some things don't just become stereotypes just because, like, maybe the person that made up was just trying to be judgmental, which it could be the case. But when things first become stereotypes, it's actually just pattern recognition in a way. And then sometimes it always ends up turning into something bad because it's not good to stereotype people. I'm acknowledging that. I'm not saying it's good to stereotype people, but it is good. Well, when it comes to Myers-Briggs, people act like it's no truth to any stereotype. It's like, how did it become a stereotype if it didn't have any truth to it? You know what I'm saying? Like, they act like it's just for it to become a stereotype in the first place, there would have to be some type of truth to it. Now, like, the thing that we learn from stereotypes is you're not supposed to type people based on stereotypes, because stereotypes can have a very just surface level sort of shallow type of aspect to it. You know what I'm saying? Also, when people just misunderstand where the stereotypes come from, that's where the real problem is. When people misunderstand where the stereotype comes from and why it's a stereotype, people tend to misinterpret that part of it. That's really the main issue with stereotyping in type and in real life, you know, in other aspects of life too. But the thing is, we got to understand that it didn't become a stereotype out of thin air. It became a stereotype because there was some type of pattern involved. But yeah, like, you don't hear people talk about stereotypes anymore. Like, okay, the proper way I feel like to use stereotypes in Myers-Briggs is, let's put it like this: you don't lead with stereotypes. However, it is worth considering sometimes. Sometimes you can, like, also always, like, when you come to certain stereotypes, you can always start to have it in the back of your head and just be like, it's harmless. Like, you can just be like, okay, just give it the benefit of doubt. Like, does this person could fit the stereotypes of this type as well, along with having, like, defining, like, characteristics of the cognitive functions. They can go in there with it, but you don't want to do it, of course, in a way to where you're just going off stereotypes. That's where the problem, right? Like, people just, like, realized that was a problem and they just took it to the whole other extreme. So, like, you know, the reason why this is a problem, I say, is because people will type people. Like, when people just go off cognitive functions, I find sometimes that people, like, they use cognitive functions to, like, defend any person being any type, pretty much. And there's, like, no boundaries. It becomes this thing where there's zero boundaries. Anybody can be any type, which is true. But, like, when you talk about stereotypes, not even stereotypes, like, when you look at just certain traits and characteristics that tend to pop up, like, you have a good idea of, based on experience, like, this type tends to be like this in most cases, or tends to be like that. It helps a lot. Like, that's what I do because I have a ton of experience with this stuff, and I'm very observant. I've observed so many different people and I've thought about these things, right? If you have a catalog list in your head or somehow of like, okay, I know from experience, this type tends to show up like this. It helps a lot. Like sometimes people go off of how to function and they use it in a way to where they just like, they don't have any idea what it looks like in real life. So they just kind of can say that anybody is any type with no real like kind of like structure to it or any type of like boundaries. You know what I'm saying? And that just shows like lack of experience, lack of like you haven't spent enough time observing in real life, things like that. You know what I'm saying? But in reality, there's certain things that just, it's like a likelihood thing. It's like probabilities. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it's just like realistically, it's me being, it's kind of like my extroverted sensing in a way, MBTI of course, but it's like you just know in certain like you know that it could be like this, but it's like realistically most of the time it doesn't show up like this. You know, that's what it is. And it's like you don't have to waste so much time on certain possibilities, like me as a sensor, like, but like you can take something from this as intuitive if you're watching this. You know what I'm saying? This sometimes keep in mind like we don't need to throw stereotypes out completely. We do, however, need to stop typing people based off stereotyping because there are some stereotypes that are kind of dumb. You know what I'm saying? That don't really make a whole bunch of sense. I get that, of course. So like, for example, like the mechanic stereotype for ISTPs. So like people tend to like, when you hear mechanic, you think like, okay, so every ISTP is somebody that fixes things or is involved in mechanics in some way. You don't think of it like what it really means when they talk about a mechanic stereotype. It really just means like that we have a mechanical mind towards everything. Like it can be anything though, like sports. Like when I like for me in sports, or if I'm working out, whatever, I look at the body as a machine. You know what I'm saying? I really do. And it's just like innately, I'm not even thinking about it. It's just natural. I naturally look at everything like a machine. I'm trying to figure out what makes how things work a certain way. I do it all the time without even realizing it. You know what I'm saying? I'm a fundamentalist. You know what I mean? Like in that way that we're fundamentalists. Then stuff like that. Yeah, I get that could be confusing, like especially to new people or to, you know, anybody. You know what I'm saying? If you just like, but yeah, there's parts to it though. Like, you know, no pun intended, but there's layers to Myers-Briggs though. Like, you know, you got the surface level sort of stereotypes. That's like an entry level, you know what I'm saying? And then when you get deeper, you know, you got the letters. I'm just giving a brief. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of just, because I could probably sit and think about a better way to break down the layers, but I'm just kind of just giving an example. But you got the letters. You can go a little deeper, and then after maybe letters, then maybe functions. And functions and got so many layers to it on its own. And then you got shadow functions, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important to take the time to go and try to understand each aspect of it instead of just the functions, which, I mean, I think that's probably the most important thing to understand, but it doesn't hurt to go back. I think even like, it can give you an even more refined understanding of the cognitive function when you realize all of it kind of works together. They're just different aspects of it that's more shallow than others, you know, really. Like all the aspects of the, you know, breaking down types and stuff like that are in their own way important, you know what I'm saying? But most of your emphasis does need to go on cognitive functions, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, the whole point of this video is just to say like, type stereotypes have some truth to them. We just got to be honest. Type stereotypes don't become stereotypes for no reason. There is some truth to every stereotype. Even some of the negative ones, there's a little bit of truth to it. However, like the negative ones are also exaggerated in most cases. I get that. But there's more context. Usually with the stereotypes, the reason why they're bad is because there's not enough context given to it. It's like sometimes like, okay, so for example, like ISTP, sometimes people started realizing like, not necessarily every, now they used to have the ISTP badass stereotype, to where ISTPs, we can develop this sort of thing where we're just highly respected and we do things that people remember, and like kind of goes down, we become like folktale legends in a way, word of mouth legends of it. Like, it's like, oh, you know, that guy that you talk about that did this really cool thing or this really badass thing, we could become that sort of thing. Like, it can become like that for us. But then people started realizing realistically that not every ISP is like that. So now people go on the other side of it and they'll be like, act like there's no truth to it. You know what I'm saying? That's just one example when it's not true. Like, the thing is with the badass stereotype, ISTPs, we're not coming out the womb necessarily like that. But over time, we do eventually get to that point where we become very highly respected and things like that. And we do memorable things. That's one example. A negative example. No, back to my point, there's truth in every stereotype. Like, there's a bad stereotype. I used to fight against this stereotype because it's not fair to this type. But there's some truth to it, unfortunately. Like, when you know, like ESFPs being like there's a stereotype for ESFPs that people envision ESFPs all being dumb blondes and like dumb blondes that are sluts. That's like kind of the negative stereotype for ESFPs. They're dumb, shallow blondes who are also sluts. Now, that only applies to ESFPs that are not very well developed, or, you know, like I said, like the immature ESFP. Yeah, that's true. The reason why they get stereotyped as that is because, like, ESFPs don't like thinking too deeply about things. Now, it doesn't mean that they're always dumb. They don't always come off as dumb, but they don't like to think deeply about things. However, a healthy ESFP, they don't need to think deeply about things. They can figure out things that take other people so long to figure out, but they figure out without thinking about it too much. That's how it applies to a well-developed ESFP. ESFP can figure things out without having to think about it too hard, or just by doing it. Like, they can just try stuff out and then they kind of figure it out, or they can just, you know, like, you can be talking to an ESFP about something real deep and they'll understand everything you're saying. Without really having to dissect it in their head, they kind of just get what you're saying. They kind of just fill you out while you're talking and they get what you're saying. And they'll grasp most of what you're saying pretty well too. But if you got an ESFP who also has a low IQ, then it looks bad. You know what I'm saying? Then they could come off as dumb. Now, I was also inspired to talk about the ESFP because I was looking at, if you heard about that girl, Lily Phillips? I was watching her because I watched the Hodge Twins. She was on Twins Pod, right? So I'm up here watching and I'm trying to type her because it just stuck out to me. I don't try to type everybody. I like to have, like, I just like to live my life. I don't always try to type people. But it stuck out to me. Lily Phillips is an ESFP. She's like a super obvious ESFP. And then I'm thinking, like, she fits all the stereotypes of what people think of when they think of ESFPs. Unfortunately, she fits the negative stereotypes of being the dumb blonde. Like I was just saying, the dumb blonde, slut. You know, she's like openly a slut and she don't care. You know what I'm saying? She don't care how it makes her look. Like, she said, and she was talking about in an interview, like, she said she doesn't think very deeply about things. She doesn't think a lot. And she called herself dumb. And I was like, that's kind of like extroverted sense. Extroverted sensors, especially SE Downs, they just kind of have awareness of themselves and they can accept their own flaws probably better than other types. But yeah, like, if you go watch that, she fits all the, like, typical stereotypes you would think of as an ESFP. But she is likely an ESFP. Like, I'm willing to bet money she's an ESFP, for real. It's not just, like, stereotype. But anyways, like, yeah. So, original point, like, there's truth to every stereotype. Stuff don't become stereotypes for no reason. We got to remember that. We can't act like there's no truth to stereotypes. So, like, sometimes, like, also when I'm typing people, when I bring up certain things, people confuse me bringing up certain things that tend to be true about types as me stereotyping them, which is not the case. I'm not like, me bringing up things that tend to be true about certain types based on solid sample size, like a big sample size, because I've been, doing this for a while. Like, well, I've been into this for a while. So it's like I have a pretty big sample size, of what it tends to look like. It's just me pointing out consistencies and patterns. It's not me stereotyping. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes people get misconstrued with that when they hear me type people or hear me talk about certain types. It's not stereotyping. It's just me talking about the reality of it. It's like, it gets to a point where it becomes so unlikely that it's not, you know, you just wasting your time. You know what I'm saying? People who don't have experience in that, they think it's stereotype because they don't get it. They don't really, like, it's different between book smarts and actual observation and real life experience. A lot of people don't have real life experience. They just spent time learning about cognitive functions, but they didn't spend that time observing it or seeing what it actually looks like. So they think they know just off of reading or just off of hearing somebody else talk about it, when there's a huge difference. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, I think that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching.